The Redmi Note 11 Pro Plus 5G is identical to the standard Redmi Note 11 Pro apart from two things: the battery size and the charging speed, with the Pro Plus variant capable of 120 watts charging instead of the normal Pro's 67 watts, and a smaller 4500 mAh battery compared to the regular Pro's 5000 mAh cell. The rest is exactly the same, from the design, screen, chipset, camera system, and software. The Note 11 Pro Plus starts from $300 in China, about $50 more than the regular Pro, so the only thing you've got to decide on is whether that fast charging is worth the extra money and reduced battery size. The color I have is called Forest and is quite moody until the light hits it. Then you really do get a much fuller, richer display of color going all the way around from a grayish blue into a pearl green. The camera cutout does protrude out of the frame, but actually the phone sits nice and flat when you use it on a hard surface. Even though this is a large phone, the flat edge design makes holding it one-handed extremely manageable. The build quality is solid. It's not the most premium of feeling, but I feel like you'd have to do a lot of work if you wanted to break this thing. The fingerprint scanner is side mounted and sits perfectly where your thumb would naturally rest, so much so that I've actually never used the face unlock even though it's activated. The reader is super accurate and fast, and I much prefer this over the more fancy under display tech. We also have dual stereo speakers, which by the way are tuned by UBL. They don't have much depth, but they can certainly hit a high volume.
Was it? No, it was...
As I said, this is a large phone. The display is 6.7 inches and runs completely flat around the edges. The chin is a little more noticeable on this compared to other devices that cost just a little bit more, but it's not a deal breaker. There's a hole punch camera cutout at the top and slight bezels around the edges, but they're pretty thin. The display itself is a 1080p AMOLED screen. It gets plenty bright with a maximum of 1200 nits, has good viewing angles, and in general is very pleasant to look at when consuming content or using in general. It is also a 120Hz refresh panel, which for me is the best hardware feature of this phone. It's actually turned off out of the box, and turning it on makes this feel like a completely different phone. Especially on a more budget-friendly phone, this makes all the difference. Then we get to the cameras, which I think for the price do a decent job. In fact, I was actually quite surprised at the quality. During the daytime it takes decent shots with plenty of detail, and although falling a little short behind the OnePlus 8T, which is over a year old now, there are times when I prefer the shots from the Pro Plus, although the AI shooting mode is pretty ugly in my opinion, going way too far in boosting colors and contrast in most situations, but leaving the HDR mode on is the perfect sweet spot for me, making scenes such as sunsets look pretty good. It will start to struggle in low light. The ultra-wide especially has quite a fall off. Things will get a lot softer and darker compared to phones that cost just a little bit more, but fortunately the night mode works really well. It's not limited just to the main lens. The telephoto and wide angle can also join the party and take pretty good shots, and I actually prefer this Pro Plus shot over the shot I took with the iPhone 13 Pro Max. What do you think? Video is capped at 4K 30 FPS and there's no stabilization, so it's pretty difficult to recommend you use this shooting mode. And unfortunately, it's the same story at 1080p 60 frames a second. It's only when you drop it down to 1080p 30 FPS that there's actually a decent amount of stabilization, so I'd probably recommend leaving it in this setting as the default unless you're using a tripod. The selfie camera is 16 megapixels and takes okay shots, although there is so much beautification and smoothing going on here, even though I've turned it all off, which is a bit silly for me personally. Okay, so this is what the selfie camera looks like. It's on 1080p 60 frames a second, it's the highest it can go. It looks kind of saturated, but the sun is literally just setting on my face. I said setting. And this is what the microphone sounds like, and the stabilization, well, you can judge for yourself. The model I have comes with 256GB of storage and 8GB of RAM, as well as a MediaTek Dimensity 920 5G chipset that uses UFS 2.2 storage. The phone does feel snappy. I've had no issues with lag or time taken to open up apps, and in general everything runs pretty fluidly. I did game on Call of Duty at 60 FPS, but was limited in performance options I could choose in the settings menu, but the game ran smoothly on those settings and still looked great. There was not that much of a heat gain during my session, and the frame rate according to the reader stayed at 60 FPS. There is actually a gaming mode built into the phone where you can adapt the graphical settings and tune some of the hardware to get the most out of the phone. Still, on PUBG, even again I couldn't pick the super highest settings, but it still ran smoothly with no problems during my session. If we look around the rest of the phone, we have an infrared scanner at the top and a headphone jack, dual SIM card tray and USB-C port at the bottom, which will allow you to plug in that 120Hz power brick, which is the reason you'll be paying more for this Plus variant. In my testing, the phone charged to 75% in just 15 minutes, which is incredible, and a full 100% in 24.5 minutes, which is not bad. But the beauty of this charger isn't just its speed. This compact brick can be the only charger you need to put in your backpack. It'll easily charge all your other devices, right up to a power-hungry 15-inch MacBook Pro, which is incredibly convenient. But the sacrifice of choosing the Pro Plus version with its fast charging is you get a smaller battery than the normal Note Pro. And even though 4600 mAh is quite large, it didn't feel particularly special, just average battery life during usage. But remember, it will take less than a minute to make up that lost 8% capacity through charging. Running the Note 11 Pro Plus is MIUI 12.5 on top of Android 11, which looks very colorful and quirky, although the control center looks like a near carbon copy of the iPhone control center, but a little less classy, with loads of words scrolling across the screen for each toggle, which looks terrible. But you can change this to a more traditional Android control center in the settings. There is also plenty of customization with notification lighting, as well as always on display designs and features, and some pretty interesting alert tone choices inspired by the nature of different regions around the world. There isn't that many interesting new features in this version of the OS, but it runs smooth and stable, and that's good enough for me. Overall, the Redmi Note 11 Pro Plus is a great phone, with a reliable camera system, high refresh screen and 120 watts quick charging. But if I'm honest, I would probably save my money and buy the normal Pro variant, which has all the same hardware, bigger battery and a decent cost saving. Yes, you'll lose that insane charging speed, but 67 watts is still pretty powerful, and the lower price point of the Redmi Note 11 Pro makes it even better value. And for more exciting tech, including my upcoming review of the awesome iQOO 9 Pro, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. And help me out by smashing that like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.